when at 8:46 that morning, all of a sudden, this horrific explosion occurred.
Te vas, vida, y tu equipaje ya está listo, tal vez ya estaba previsto.
Welcome, Billy.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you so much, and welcome, Susie.
Thank you for having me again, Gabo.
So, I want you to hear from Billy because when I heard, I respect him a lot. He's a great entrepreneur in Houston, but we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about a story that he told me the other day that I thought it was amazing. And you don't know the story.
No.
So that's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
And it's you lead it.
What's the story about?
Well, very simply, I am a survivor of the 9/11 attacks on New York City.
Wow. Okay.
So at a high level, I was working for a company on the 85th floor of the North Tower, which was the first tower to be hit. And luckily for me and thousands of others, the second tower to go down that day. And I have told my story of survival, of escape, and of helping people almost every year since 9/11. So I talk about it probably 5 to 10 times a year to groups big and small, public, private. And it's very, I try to make it very informative, inspirational, very educational. And, the impact that it has on me is it's very therapeutic for me to get it off my chest. Mm-hmm. But I think sort of in the yin yang part of it, it's also, I can see the impact it has on the people when they hear the story.
Of course.
Think about it. 99.95% of the population saw it from the outside. If I can bring a first person's account and recount of what we saw, smelled, experienced, hopefully that changes people's opinions on, can they survive something or, how they might react in a crisis situation.
Yeah, for sure. So take us back to, this was 23 years ago?
Yep.
And how old were you? Not trying to age, I'm just trying to imagine, a certain stage of life that you were in. I'm sure it was a job that, well, do tell me about the job and what you were doing there and what it felt like to be before all this happened, right?
Yeah, so at the time I was 27 years old. And I was working as a assistant commodity trader for a company called SMW Trading Company. That company was headquartered in Chicago, but they had this office in New York City in the World Trade Center. I was married at the time, no kids, and this was I had been working for this company for only about 9 months. I think I started January 1st of that year.
Tell me about that day. You were there in the morning, early.
So that particular morning, I made it down to the complex. And when I say complex, that World Trade Center complex was huge. It wasn't just, the two towers. It wasn't just the North Tower and the South Tower. There were 7 different buildings that made up the complex, not to mention there was a whole underground ecosystem. There was a galleria underground, right? It was the World Trade Center Mall. And all underground, right? So you had the Gap store, Banana Republic, you had all kinds of large...
Big in terms of land, footprint.
I don't know in terms of, exact
square footage and whatnot.
Like the Galleria in Houston.
Like the Galleria in Houston.
But it probably close because it was early in the day, right? When it happened, it was very early.
Yeah, but a lot of those, delis were open, a lot of those stores were open early. So I made it down to that complex, got off the subway there around 8:15 or so, and actually stopped off and made an ATM deposit at my bank. There was a little Chase kiosk right in front.
Dates you.
Right in front. I know, right? Right in front of the 2 World Trade Center tower, and went to my building, made it upstairs, and I had been compiling reports and doing whatever was necessary, what my normal daily chores there on the 85th floor. And I had just finished, and we had a small office. There were only 10 or 11, 12 people there that day. And, we had one, say like a sort of not a conference area, but just a group sort of bullpen area, conference table. And then we had a conference room and then 2 or 3 smaller little cubicle offices. I had just finished my daily chore. We were talking about Monday Night Football the night before because the Giants had just lost to the Broncos. And
Tuesday, that's right. Yeah.
Yes, Tuesday. It was a beautiful day. It was like crisp, beautiful, blue sky, crisp, September morning. And so I'm sitting there like you are right now. When at 8:46 that morning, all of a sudden, this horrific explosion occurred. And I was thrown from my chair onto my knees. And I remember seeing this ghostly column of air shoot into our office. And as quickly as it shot in, it shot back out. And as it did so, it took a couple of pieces of paper and flipped them up, and they settled back down to the ground. A couple of ceiling tiles fell. And all the while, and as it shot out, it closed the door to the hallway outside, closed it shut. And as I struggled to stand up, I realized that this 110-story building, this building that took up an acre footprint, 70 yards wide and 70 yards long, was lurching back.
You felt it.
Forth. Absolutely. I thought this was the first time of 2 times that day I thought I was going to die. We were going so far one way, I thought we were going over. It was almost like being at the top of a roller coaster ride, and you're like, okay, I'm about to go over, and your stomach sort of gets up to into your throat. I had that feeling one way and back the other way. And as that movement occurred, it only lasted probably 10 seconds, but it seemed like an eternity.
Of course. Time moves slower.
Exactly. What's interesting is, of course, now people are like, what the heck happened? Because right outside, now you're looking outside, we would be looking north. You could see things sort of falling, and you'd see smoke, and then you'd see an occasional fireball come from above us. And, people are like struggling to figure out what's going on. Some people speculated it was a bomb.
You were with your other 9 or 10 people in the office, and you're trying to figure out what's happening.
What's happening? What's going on? And so
at this point, just to bring us back in time to 2001, some people have cell phones, but they're not the same as right now, obviously. You had to make more calls, or texting was not what it is right now.
Correct.
So you weren't in touch with your wife or with anybody else at that moment.
Not at that moment. That wasn't my first thought.
It was just like, what's happening? Because right now, I think emergency-wise, we all grab our devices.
Correct.
To figure out what's happening. Obviously, we don't have that back then.
No.
And you just, based on your clues, right? What are you seeing? What are you smelling?
That's right. That's right.
And are people, like, this is a couple minutes in, are people talking to each other? Is anybody hurt? Like, what's happening on your floor?
Yeah, so, again, there's a little bit of speculation. What's going on? What do we do? Some people said, let's just stay and wait for an announcement from like a public service announcement to come over the
loudspeaker,
loudspeaker.
But you didn't know what was happening. You thought it was fire?
Well, we didn't know, right? I mean, we're trying to process all of this in a short period of time. Now, my boss did chime in at this point, and he said, because people were speculating, was it a bomb? And he said, no, that was a commercial airliner that just flew into our building. So my boss, again, we faced north. Yeah. So my boss was sitting talking to his wife on the phone. And normally at 85 stories tall, he could see planes taking off and landing from LaGuardia Airport some 8 miles to the northeast, right? Well, he caught this plane, coming over the spine of the island, which seemed a little bit odd, and he caught it right around, like, say, the distance of the Empire State Building. And he tells his wife, I think this plane's coming right for us. And right at the last second, I mean, this thing's going 450, 500 miles an hour. And right at the last second, he said it came right above us. I mean, the plane entered our building between the 93rd and 99th floors.
So close to where you were.
I mean, that's not a big, exactly.
You were 85 and it was 93rd. So we want to go into why they went that way, but there's so many little tiny reasons that you were able to not to escape, right?
Correct.
So then when he felt that, he knew right away that's what had happened.
Absolutely. He knew right away. But of course we didn't see it.
But
We
you
just
were
felt it.
there. So how he saw you didn't see it? Did he tell you? He told you?
Yes, but it went in one ear and out the other. Like, oh, plane hit the building. Oh, okay, now what? Like,
Exactly.
What's the next step?
Yeah.
Right.
What are you thinking? Like, how's your like biology at that point? Like, what are you thinking? Are you thinking surviving? Like, what are you thinking?
I don't know that I need to survive. All I'm trying to do is like take in all this information. Right? The door was closed shut. Papers were flipped to the ground. There's ceiling tiles down, but there's no fire. And there's light in the office and the computers work. All the electricity still worked.
So you're trying to assess how serious is this?
That's right. So the first thing I do, for whatever reason, is I go over to the door to see if it's to see if it's hot. Just like we were 5 years old, go feel the door, feel the handle. Is it hot? No, it wasn't. So I open the door, and I'm opening the door to the hallway, right? So I open the door, and as I look out into the hallway, it's black. It's pitch black, and I see this creature crawling towards me on the ceiling. And I quickly realize, because I could smell it, I realize what it is. It's a smoke ball coming towards us. So I closed the door as quickly as I could because I knew we had good air inside our office. And so I sat there for a couple of minutes. We deliberated, are we going to leave? No, we're not. Somebody said, hey, where's one of our colleagues? His name was Marvin Pickram. And somebody said, where's Marvin? And somebody said he just went to the bathroom right before the explosion. So this is about maybe a minute goes by, and I go back to the door and I open it. And now that creature that had been crawling towards me had sort of subsided, and you could look out. And as I looked out into the hallway, I walked out. Now there's right across 5 feet from me, there's people not even opening their doors going, is anybody out there? What's going on?
Like
Some other company, just trying to assess the situation, right? So I walk out and I could see fires on the ground. Not many, but 2 or 3 little smoldering fires on the ground. And as I walk to the main spine of our floor, when I turned to the left, I looked down the main spine of our floor, which would have been down towards the elevator bank. And that was just engulfed in flames. Doors were mangled and twisted and broken. We weren't taking the elevator down. I looked to the right, and it was pretty clean. Like, there was light, it was almost like nothing had happened. Right across from me was the bathroom. So I walked into the bathroom, and I walked in, and it was like in pristine condition, like nothing had happened. And I looked around, I called for Marvin, my colleague, and he said, and nothing was there, no answer, nothing, nobody was in there, right? And so I walked back. So Marvin's story, I'll tell you, I'll fast forward. I asked Marvin later, what happened, man? He said, well, I went to the bathroom, and as I was coming out, I had taken just 2 or 3 steps towards the elevators, because he was going to go down and take that trek, go down the elevators, walk across the West Side Highway, go to the World Financial Center. He said, I took a couple of steps towards the elevators, and the building got struck, this explosion, and I'm thrown into the wall. And what happened was he saw an explosion of fire down by the elevators. So he quickly turned and started going the opposite way, away from it. And he said, I tried doors and nothing would open. And finally, at the end of the hall, I'm getting chased by this fireball. And so at the end of the hall, I open the door. It's to some law firm. And I walk in. And as I'm closing the door behind me, the fireball hits me and sears my
oh my gosh.
my eyebrows off. And that's how close he was to the fireball.
Wow.
So I walk back into our office. At this point, half the group is like ready to go. And the other half is still like, the other half of the group was the older like admin staff who had been there they had actually experienced the bombing in 1993.
Sure, they're like, we've been there,
Yeah,
like
we've been
these
there.
things happen. Yeah.
Right.
Were you able to talk on the phone, like to check what's going on or not?
So once we got into the emergency stairwell, we tried to use our phone. And you remember, it was like you were talking about, it's not the same technology back then, right? First of all, texting wasn't a big deal because you didn't have...
You had to have multiple keys.
You had to hit the 2 button 3 times to get to a D and all this stuff. And so, we tried to use our phone. Of course, it was a flip phone, and it would say something like "service unavailable. Try again later."
The internet, you couldn't.
No, forget the internet. And even the phone camera was terrible, right? So taking pictures was not like you see nowadays. I mean, nowadays you take 100 pictures of the same scene. Back then, you took one picture and hoped that it looked kind of good, but that wasn't even something you would do. So we start the descent, right? And
how long would it take? Did you know how long it would take to go down or not?
I mean, I can tell you.
But I want to ask what it felt like also. Like, was it full of people?
So when we got into the first stairwell, which actually was not far away from us, it was literally right across from the bathroom that I'd gone in to find Marvin. As we entered, we moved pretty quickly. I got down 85 to about the 82nd floor. We just went down 3 floors, and my colleague Rob and I decided we would get a couple of fire extinguishers. Now, you have to remember, again, even as we were descending, there's no smoke, there's no fire, there's no imminent danger. But we decided, let's break into this fire extinguisher holder on the wall in the emergency stairwell. And so he and I both get our emergency fire extinguishers, and we start carrying it down. We MacGyvered that thing, man. Really? Yeah, kicked it in.
Nice.
It's like the mom who, lifts the car to save her baby. You just kind of get super, super strong.
And so we go, and we're moving fairly quickly. But I get down to, let's say, about the 78th floor. I forget exactly where, but it was around the 78th floor. And so, again, you're in an emergency stairwell, and your only thought is, I'm descending to escape. That's sort of the thought, right? People are coming back up the stairs, and they're exiting onto that floor. And of course, that's not a fun sight, right? You're like, we're escaping. Why are you coming up? So we asked them, what's going on? And they said, well, the door down below is pinned shut. We're like, what are you talking about? The door is pinned shut. Whatever. We had to exit the emergency stairwell. We enter this floor, and we got to find another stairwell. And there's some debris that we have to climb over. There's some like wires that are kind of sparking and this and that. And
I know, like a movie set when there's
yes,
things are.
It was a movie set for sure. You had to climb over some walls that had fallen in halfway down, and so we made our way down the hallway to the next stairwell, and then it became like Houston traffic at 3 p.m. It was stop and go the rest of the way.
So it was just full of people. So it's interesting. They had 3 stairs, and I don't know up to date the code, but I know there's always 2 stairs in every building. They had to have 3, probably because of the scale of the building. Thank God they had 3. Yeah. So one of them, the one where you first were, was shut, but maybe not all the way down. Well, who knows?
Not all the way down.
Nobody will ever know. But
so it took me, as I processed the story in my mind and tried to figure things out, obviously I'm just later that night or the next day or the whole week later, I'm thinking, what were they talking about? Why was a door pinned shut that we had to leave that stairwell? Yeah. So the interesting part about each of those buildings, right? It's a 110 story towers, 2 of them, right? Mm-hmm. Each building had 99 elevators. So some of those elevators would service, say, from the ground floor up to the 3rd or 4th, 5th, 20th floor, right? Then you had some express elevators that took you a lot higher. Then you had cargo elevators that, normal people, pedestrians, just normal workers would never use, right? And then once you got higher, you got another set of elevators. And then you had the penthouse elevators. So there were 99 elevators. Well, in order to lift all those elevators, you've got mechanical rooms, right? And so occasionally in one of those stairwells, as it came down, it would hit the top of one of those mechanical rooms. And so you would hit a platform that would take you from here on the platform, and then you'd start your motion back down sinusoidally down into the... So we get out of the stairwell, we go to the second stairwell, and now it's full. And it's just stop and go all the way. To fast forward for you, how long did it take me to go 85 floors? If my building was hit at 8:46 and it took us 5 minutes to get into the first stairwell, so that makes it 8:51, right? When I got down, I got downstairs, and I'll fast forward. I almost get trapped underground when the first building fell. And that first building fell at 9:57. So it took me over an hour to get down 85 stories.
And so that hour that I'm sure you relived in your head many times, you're going down, it's a sea of people. You're all going down together.
It is a sea of people. Yeah.
But ask him about whether people were pushing or freaking out.
Yeah, I'm curious about what it felt like.
It was just a normal descent. People would make jokes. People would try their phones. Again, it would say service unavailable. Occasionally you'd get a faint ring and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to get out. And then it would just go silent again. People were talking about Monday Night Football. Then all of a sudden, 15 minutes into our descent, then people are starting to talk about the fact that the other building was hit. And to me, that story of the other building getting hit by another plane went in one ear and out the other. In my mind...
So what do you have to do?
It did go... So while you were going down, there was the other...
That's right. I didn't feel it. Or if I felt it, I wouldn't have thought anything about it.
Because, by the way, I'm just trying to imagine, I actually love going up and down stairwells because elevators are so slow sometimes.
It's a workout.
It's a workout. Plus that, you get your money, you get your workout for free there also. But it's dark. There's no windows. You don't have any ventilation extra. You're stuck there. It feels a little claustrophobic. Plus other people. And you're just focusing on the next step forward.
Absolutely. You're focusing on the next step in front of you. And so we continue down around the 50th floor. We're still in the stairwell going down, right? And still in the claustrophobia and whatnot. And as we're turning, you hear from above somebody say, everybody move right. Everybody move to your right. Okay, what? What's going on? So you look around, you look above us, and all of a sudden it's evident what's happening. This caravan of people, led by a gentleman in a white shirt, and his shirt was like half bloodied. He had a bandage that covered half of his head, and it was bloodied. And he was leading a group of about 5 or 6 people, all holding on to him. And they caravanned their way, and everybody moved to their right in the stairwell and let them pass. Okay? And they made their way down, and then they got out of sight. And then as they passed, everybody just filled back in. Nobody took advantage of the space that they made. Nobody cut in line. Nobody was scrambling, pushing their way. It was like an amazing sight of humanity in that situation. Now, again, nobody knew the building was going to fall.
Sure, you don't know that every second really is so valuable at that moment. But at the same time, it probably, in retrospect, and even in the moment, warmed your heart that we all pitch in to help those who need it the most in that moment.
Correct. Exactly. And it was a short time later, I'd say maybe 10 or so flights down, that we then saw the most amazing sight, right? Around the 45th, 40th floor, wherever.
When you're like, I'm halfway down. This is okay. We got this.
What we saw was, so as we're continuing down, and at this point, man, I've like dropped the fire extinguisher. There was no need for it.
It's heavy.
It was heavy. I was dripping in sweat because I had a jacket on, like I said earlier. I had a big jacket on, not because it was cold outside, it was my trader's jacket. And dropped the fire extinguisher, and I even had, I had the Investors Business Daily newspaper with me, and I threw it. And I remember to this day, I threw it on the ground in the stairwell, and like two flights down, I thought to myself, man, I just fucking trashed the building.
Oh, this newspaper, like, yeah, that made a difference. That newspaper.
The newspaper. I trashed the building.
Who threw a newspaper?
From a Texan, throwing, littering the building. No, I did not go back to go get it. And so what we saw around the 40th floor, I'd say, plus or minus, was a firefighter, the first firefighter coming up. And here's a guy wearing like 80 pounds of gear coming up. And it was an amazing sight because not only did you see a firefighter coming up the stairs, you knew immediately everything below that was safe. whether you did or didn't know before. So whatever anxiety of that
Yeah.
was popped.
Yeah.
But the beauty of it was, here comes a guy coming up the stairs, huffing and puffing, and all he could do was offer words of encouragement. Keep going. You're almost there. You've got this.
Can you imagine going up 40 pounds, you said, or whatever?
Usually they're wearing 80 pounds of gear.
I mean, first of all, that's a workout, but also just completely selfless.
Completely selfless.
Because that guy passed away, right?
I think he passed away.
There's no way he made it out.
No, not that one.
I mean, if you made it out and you were, I'm not sure, we'll get into the timing of it, but if he was going up, there's just, how do you, right? So again, like all these signs, like it's obviously scary and all this, but you're seeing all these beautiful pieces of humanity that only arise in crises. And it makes you probably feel, I mean, I'm not sure about how did you feel when you saw all those, the firemen and people letting the injured guy pass along? It's kind of makes you not happy, but hopeful maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, like I said, whatever anxiety there might have been in the not knowing, as you gather more information, the firefighter comes up, everything below him is safe or likely safe. So I was in you could call it a survival mode, right? So I was hyper-focused on that. And just as you gather more information, you're just trying to process this information. That's all you can do, because you're in an emergency stairwell with people all around you and you can't go any faster, right? So yes, I mean, it was hopeful that seeing this gentleman who passed us, bloodied head, bloodied shirt, that he was leading a caravan of people, right? And as we continued down, it seemed like every 5 stories they had opened the doors onto that floor, and you could see firefighters triaging different people who might be injured or tired or whatever the case may be. And then around the 19th floor, as we're descending, my colleague and I, and at this point my whole company is now like, I only know
Lost them.
I've lost it for whatever reason. It's just become extended. So I'm here with my good friend Rob, and it was just he and I, and we happen upon this lady who's just standing there. And for whatever reason, he and I decide to stop and ask her, "Is everything okay?" And she said, "I can't go on anymore. I'm so tired." She had her shoes off. She was carrying a bag that looked like it was 80 pounds. I think she had everything in her office in that bag. As the cliche is, she had everything and the kitchen sink. Okay. And so Rob and this lady, Juliet, we learned her name, and then myself, the three of us became our own little caravan. And we start walking together, and we start helping this woman down. And we go slowly. And people are passing us. And now at this point, at the 19th and 18th and so on, now it's sort of, things are getting better. We're passing other people who might have been slow and cogs in the system. And now people are starting to move a lot faster. And they're passing.
I thought...
Go ahead. No. I was how in the airplane, they always tell you, like, leave all your stuff behind. Because in an emergency, you're like, wait, I need to take my coffee mug and the photo of my kids. So did you ever, that obviously clearly now you would have been like, drop the backpack, lady, it doesn't matter. But in that moment, you're like, bring the backpack. Yeah. Or what did you say anything about the backpack?
Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing.
You're like, you have to bring your notebook. Yeah.
Because Rob took the bag. So it wasn't my problem.
Chandelier, yes.
Yeah. So Rob took it. And Juliet was left to walk. I guess she was walking without her shoes on. But we just slowly made our way down. And as we got down to the final floor, they take us out of the stairwell and into basically like the street level lobby of the World Trade Center.
Are people like this way, kind of corralling you
so
certain direction?
The people who were corralling us were the first responders. So you had police, firefighters, Port Authority personnel, and they were starting to direct us and direct our descent. And what do we do? As we're still inside the building, but you can see like the courtyard between our building and 2. You can see the courtyard out of the complex on the street. You can see blue skies. You can see trees.
It felt amazing to see that light. Like, there it is.
And you can see debris on the ground, and there's little fires on the trees, and there's little fires on the ground, and there's body parts, and your mind can't figure out what's going on.
There's body parts?
Yes.
Was that the first time?
Outside. So firefighters, police, Port Authority, first responders are not directing us out onto the street. Instead, because of collateral damage, because there's stuff falling from above, there's people jumping, they wanted to take us down into the underground and take us a good 400, 500, 600 yards away from the whole complex and then back out onto the street.
Because of the falling people?
Because of debris falling.
Because you could have a piece of the building fall, I guess, and that could kill you.
How many people jump, do we know?
We don't. As we progress into the underground, we enter an area of that mall where it sort of just becomes a big town square, let's call, right? So shops and stores are all on the outside. It's big open area. Right in the middle of the open area is a series of, I forget, let's call it 12 escalators that would have taken you further down to like the subways, the PATH trains, even several sub-stories below you, right? And so we make this turn in front of the Gap store that's underground, right? And there's still electricity. And Juliet, who we're helping, says, "I've got to stop just for a second. I'm so tired." I said, "Okay." And I gave her some water, which I still had. She took some water, and we're standing there processing. We've got a fireman or a first responder, sort of urging us, "We got to go, everybody. We keep moving. Everybody, we keep moving." And so, as this happens, from around the corner that we just came, 5 yards, 10 yards, 15 yards from us, I hear rumbling. And then I hear screaming. And then I hear what sounds like people's shoes on the ground running. And then in this town square underground, I notice a full quarter of the underground, a bank of lights just flicks off. And then another. And then somebody says, "Everybody run." And then as quickly as they say that, and screaming and rumbling and foot pattering and another bank of lights, and somebody says, "Everybody down." And I push Juliet and she pushes Rob. And I dive to a half wall that would have been the half wall. If I had hopped over the half wall, I would have gone down the escalators and fallen into the escalators underground. So I'm diving into this half wall and I ball myself up because for the second time that day, I thought I was going to die. I thought the ceiling was going to come in and sever me in half. Those were thoughts that went through my head. It was so loud. I was balled up in the fetal position. I had closed my eyes. I had clenched my teeth, and I was hoping and praying that I was in a position that wouldn't sever me in half. I was getting pelted with shards of glass and whatever else probably from the Gap store right behind me, and just a maelstrom of activity and noise. And it took me probably till that evening to kind of piece back what the heck happened. Basically, I was underground in that mall when 2 World Trade fell. And it fell right around me.
Yeah.
And
I cannot imagine.
So I'm there in this fetal position, tightened up. I mean, I was tight. My body was fully clenched. And so the noise stopped. I didn't get severed in half. And so I opened my eyes. That's the first thing I did. And I couldn't see anything. So I thought, oh shit, I was holding my eyes too tight. Maybe my muscles were just, too tight. So I closed them again, and then I opened them again, and I realized it was pitch black. So if you've ever experienced pitch black, you know that if you put your fingers at your eyes, you can't even see your eyes. You can't see them. So I take my first breath, and my first breath was a suffocating breath. Whatever I breathed cut when it went down. So whatever was suspended in the air, dust, debris, soot, ash, glass,
Straight smoke.
It went in and cut on the way. It felt like it cut on the way down. So I held my breath as best I could for another however long. And then my next breath was a little easier. And the next breath after that was a little easier. Now, whatever was in the air was starting to get a little bit clearer, but it's black as all get out. You start to see a little bit of light, but not much. And however long it took from that point till seeing the first firefighter, I presume as a firefighter, a person with a strong candlelight flashlight comes from behind where we were. And he walks right past us. I call out for Juliet. She answers quickly. Rob, it takes 2 or 3 or 4 times to call her his name, and he finally answers. He's okay. And this firefighter's walking by us, and I tell Juliet, we got to get up. And this firefighter has there's only 6 or 7 people with this firefighter. So there's only 7 or 8 people that walked from where we just came from, around the corner of the Gap store, around this corridor that would have taken us to 2 and back to our bar tower. That's it. There was nobody else.
So everybody behind those people didn't make it?
No. Juliet, as it turns out later, we find out, she worked for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, which employed 10,000 people, many of whom were in our building. So Juliet knows people that were ahead of us as they've shared stories. Building fell, I was out on the street. Building fell, I was, they shared stories.
You when it happened, yeah.
Where were you?
So everybody knew where they were
and
when that
people were descending in the first tower, our tower. They were descending when the 2 fell. But there's a group of people that she had to attend funerals to.
That were right in the middle. So you could have been a little bit ahead, like you were, or behind, and you would have survived. But exactly in that little span of space, those people didn't make it.
That's correct.
That must have felt shocking to be so close.
Yeah, when you think about the what ifs, which I try not to do in this whole process, when you think about the what ifs can take your mind into a very negative situation, and you can start to get very depressed.
Well, in this case, the what ifs work for you because you are here, right? I mean, it's a lot of those people are not here with us anymore, but they don't know how close they were to potentially surviving, right?
That's right.
In a way, our whole lives are always a whole what ifs, right? I mean, every time we're about in our lives, or even the fact that we are the ones that made it.
Oh, well, sure.
All these things. But in that case, it was so present for you.
That's right. I mean, what if I met somebody else? What if I married somebody else? What if I didn't have kids? What if there's, you can go but in this micro sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you,
close, it's so real. It's right there.
It's right there.
Is it survivor's guilt that you're talking about?
There is a lot. I go through bouts of survivor's guilt. Yes. I go through a little bit of bouts of PTSD. In fact, survivor's guilt got so strong for me in around the 2008 or 9 timeframe. I mean, 7 or 8 years after, I stopped telling my story. I felt like I was trouncing on the graves of those who perished.
And we can get to that, but take us through the moment. So one question I had was, what does it feel like to have a building? I don't know, maybe you can tell how far away was it, but like the pressure that you feel of something like that falling, how far away from you? What does that feel like?
Well, I would say that building was roughly 100 to 150 yards away from me, which is not a lot, right? You're talking about, again, a building that had a footprint of 70 yards by 70 yards, right? And
A mile higher.
yeah, and a mile high, like many feet high, right? 110 stories tall. So yeah, that's not a lot of space between.
What does it feel like? What did it feel?
Well, kind of like I said, I mean, it was loud. It was from a pressure standpoint, I don't remember the pressure. When if you go back to when the plane hit our building, that was an immediate change of air pressure. Like my ears popped immediately. Yes. You know, remember I told you a ghostly column of air shot into our office and then shot out? I mean, I saw that column of air. I mean, that changed. I could feel something. That was a concussion, right? A concussive wave, because the plane struck right above me, you know, not 8, 9, 10 stories above me. So that was concussive. This, I don't remember the concussion. I was so worried that I was going to have the ceiling fall on me, that that passed me. Now, what is interesting is if you go back in time and look at some of the recordings of, like, you know, go to Central Park. Central Park recorded a seismic event. Yeah. You know.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So that building's fall did create a shockwave.
Yeah. So you're there, and the fireman comes with 6 people, and you're like, "Let's go, Juliet, Rob, it's time."
So I get Juliet up. Rob and the 3 of us catch up to the firefighter, and of course now there's other people that have gotten themselves up, and it's now still dark as hell underground, but you see some light, and now you're following the same progression of firefighters and people that would follow the same path that they would have taken us. We get to an escalator or stairs that is just completely engulfed and not engulfed, but completely full of debris. And we walk up to this street level, and you walk out, and you're now out into the open, and it's just, there's 6, 7, 8 inches deep, thick of debris and papers and dust, and it's snowing dust. Yeah. There's, you know, and if you've been, you know, if you've been in the mountains, or if you've been where it's snowed before, which it never snows in Houston, or hardly ever does, but if you've ever experienced a snowfall, you know there's a muting of audio, right? Sound gets muted. Mm-hmm. And that's what I remember that distinctly. Like, it was that eerie mute of sound when I walked out on the street, because it was snowing debris. And I still didn't know a building had fallen. I didn't look up. I had no idea. Yeah,
but you had no idea to know that big earthquake / explosion that you felt was the building falling. Because that again was not a common occurrence. It's not a common occurrence. And so your brain is not like, oh yeah, of course that's what it sounds and feels like, because you've never seen or experienced one.
But is your brain thinking what happened, or is your brain thinking just keep walking?
Just keep going. Just keep going.
So when you come out of the building, can you breathe a sigh of relief that you're out?
Well, yes. Yes, I mean, anxiety is much less now.
Yes,
for sure.
And you're with Rob and Juliet still.
Yes, Rob was now a little bit more ahead of us, so I was with Juliet. As we're walking, we're about to hit a street, and this young gentleman is running towards us. And still, everything's just covered in dust and debris. It's like it snowed almost, right? And this guy's running towards us, and he's yelling, and he says, "Everybody look under cars for bodies. Everybody look under cars for bodies." And as quickly as he comes, he runs down the street. Of course, I'm thinking to myself, what are you talking about? Look under cars for bodies? So, I didn't know what he was talking. I thought I misheard him.
What did he mean? Why would there be bodies underneath the cars?
A building had just fallen.
Yeah. So maybe a body would have kind of rolled underneath the car.
I don't know. Or the building.
Maybe he saw one person under a car, and so he's like, that's where we have to look for the bodies.
What I think he meant was, because I have colleagues who experienced the dust cloud that dust cloud moved very swiftly through the downtown area, and people got caught outside in that dust cloud in a suffocating area, in a suffocating air. And so many took refuge around and under cars. That makes sense. So that's what he was saying. But it took me a while to kind of figure out the hell he was saying.
So you were talking earlier about PTSD and survivor's guilt. What was it like? Like, do you see like chapters of your life that, you know, the first 5 years after that, or the first 10 years, and then what does it feel like right now to go back and to think about that moment so many years ago or that day? How are you different? And, you know, what stages have you gone through in the...
Well, you know, in those first 7 or 8 years, I was happy to tell my story. Yeah. And then, you know, there's some level of comedy, levity that I bring to that story, and you know, like Rob dropping Juliet's bag, right? But somewhere along the way in that time frame, I thought that I might be stepping on people's graves, and that survivor guilt of being able to tell the story and having comedy and laughing at that moment or at that situation just caused me, for whatever reason, just to say, you know what, I'm not doing this anymore. I just can't. It was too strong. But it was, that only lasted, or that period of time only lasted a short period of time, because my daughter, who would have been 7 or 8-ish at the time, was doing a book report, and she chose to do her book report on 9/11. And so I said, of course I'll help you, baby. And we start to look on the web for information on 9/11 to help her, because my story wasn't enough. There were other questions she was asking.
Sure.
I was blown away at that time by the amount of misinformation and conspiracy theories that were already rampant. Wow. 50% of the stuff that she found through a simple search about 9/11 was incorrect information. And I'm talking like, you know, let's say, for example, that our buildings weren't hit by a plane, they were hit by rockets, or that, you know, the government conspired to blow up the building, that's why they came down. And, you know, 7 World Trade Center, which has been at the forefront of every conspiracy theorist, you know, theory on what happened. You know, they could point to that and say 7 World Trade Center towers should not have fallen, but it fell because they blew it up, and here's proof why. And so when I saw that, I realized, here's my daughter, who obviously wasn't born at the time. As I said, she was born afterwards, because I didn't have kids at the time. Here's all of a sudden now we're having children that were never around at that time, who are now learning this information on the web, and it's all, not all, but 50% of it's, how can they sift through this trash and this misinformation? And here's somebody who's willing to talk about it, because at this time, even though I had some survivor guilt and some PTSD, I knew the impact that I had on people when they listened to it. I mean, you could hear the old cliches like, oh my God, you could hear a pin drop when people were listening to your talk, and nobody left. Normally they leave, and, you know, all these things. And I'm thinking to myself, and it's therapeutic for me to get it off my chest. And it's like, well, you know what? I've got to get back out there, and I need to tell this story. I need to keep it alive, because otherwise it's going to get twisted. The information is going to get twisted. The story is going to get twisted. And I'm going to do whatever I can to keep the story alive. When I tell people, they're going to hear it. And if I can inspire people or inform or educate people, if I can bring their focus on how important first responders are to situations like this, because here I am, just a regular Joe Blow. I was trying to survive while, take first responders, for example. They're the ones, like, what do we say? You know, we're running from the fire. They're running into it.
You saw that, yeah.
Yeah. I truly saw that. It's all part of my story. And so I'm going to keep my story alive, because it's important. You know, I think that How has it changed my life? I'm at a crossroads in my life now where I've been able to say, you've had an experience that nobody, I mean, maybe 10,000 people experienced in the world, in the U.S., right? 10,000 people in the world experienced. And I know there are other experiences and other terrible, tragic situations that have gone through, not just in the U.S., but also across the world. But you've got a story to tell. And a lot of people don't like to tell it. Like my colleagues, many of my colleagues won't tell their story. Some do, but it's only a handful. They will not tell the story for whatever reasons, PTSD or whatnot. I'm willing to tell a story that is impactful, and I'm happy to do it. And that's why I'm here today, is to share this with you and your followers and your listeners.
Te vas, vida, y tu equipaje ya está listo, tal vez ya estaba previsto.